I'm so sorry that I was not your mother. If I was your mother, you would have been so loved, held in the arms of joyous light. Never would the stories plight the world unfurled before our eyes, a pure demise of nations sitting peaceful under a night sky. If I was your mother, the world would have been warm. So much laughter and joy, and nothing would harm. I can't imagine the stain, the soul-stealing pain that the little boy you must have seen and believed.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
We can turn the tide. It is time to take responsibility. Step up and take action.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try.
A lot of you last week enjoyed my Russell Brand video where we looked at his politics and his political evolution. He's actually one of the more interesting celebrities in that he has always been outspoken, but he actually used to have like pretty rational and sane politics before what happened to him recently. You can go check out both parts of that video, which I made last week. Thanks for all the support on those videos. So carrying on with the celebrity topic, there's actually a video I wanted to make a couple of weeks ago because of AnnaLyne McCord's video, which I showed you in some of my coverage of the recent drama. But anyway, what I wanted to focus on today is celebrities having some sort of like main character syndrome, something you might have seen if you use TikTok, and how they think like when there's a time of global crisis, it falls to them to do something. Now, of course, it can be pretty admirable to do something in a time of global crisis, but often their action is not anything useful, not anything even remotely helpful. It's just stuff that is really for them to feel better about themselves, because a lot of what they actually do is nothing but make you cringe and think you could use your platform for doing things a lot better. And I feel like this goes all the way back to like BandAid and LiveAid, which we're going to talk about as well. But at least with them, there was actually like money raised for a good cause, but just the way the money was actually used didn't actually help the situation much. And it's probably not surprising that a lot of celebrities who do this stuff are like white celebrities talking about issues where often white people aren't the subject of the controversy or are the people suffering. So then you have that whole element in there as well. So what I want to do today is talk about the main character syndrome stuff, then talk about the Imagine video, the backlash to that, and how Gal Gadot feels about it today. Talk about this other video, which I remember covering on this channel actually. They might have flown under the radar for a couple of you. And then finish with this bit with the AnnaLyne McCord really strange poem. And then we're going to talk about like BandAid and LiveAid. Now, before we go any further, I'm just going to remind you, like the video if you like it, and maybe comment. A lot of you say that you never remember to do these things, and as I remind you, if you want to support my channel, consider becoming a patron. I'm trying to build up as many $1 to $3 patrons as possible, and at the moment, you get my Nintendo Switch friend code, and you get access to the private patrons Discord server. If people do join the Patreon in the next couple of weeks, can you please give me a message on Instagram? It's nothing serious. There's just some issues with Patreon at the moment and sending links. So please, if you do join, or if I haven't sent you the link yet, please give me a message on Instagram or tweet at me and I will DM you. Also follow me on social media at Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram, and join our subreddit. The link to that in the description, and also the second channel, the Kavernacle Extra. I didn't live stream last week, but I'm gonna live stream this week. So first I want to talk about like what is main character syndrome. Now you guys probably can just tell what it is from the description, but it's something that has been popularized thanks to things like Sex and the City and TikTok. So 2 articles I just want to show you quick, not very long. Main character syndrome by Vox. Main character syndrome as a term is thrown around often sardonically or ironically to define behavior where someone acts and maybe even believes that the real world essentially serves as a TV series about their own life. This is characterized by behavior that indicates that everything that happens exists only to further their story or contribute to their own enlightenment, and that they feel and understand things with greater clarity than the people around them. Platforms like Instagram and Facebook have been goading us to curate and romanticize our own lives for years. It's gotten to the point that what's put on social media has become a performance that we're all in on, that we all know is just another fantasy, and since we are all the main characters of our own social feeds, it's not a big surprise that this behaviour has tipped over into something of an extreme. 4 signs you have main character syndrome, according to therapists, and there's an article in Insider. Talking about the Sex and the City thing, Carrie Bradshaw is the main character in more ways than one. I haven't actually watched this show, probably not very surprising to people. The character of Carrie is generally regarded in pop culture as a self-centered, entitled person whose life needs to be the center of her friend's attention. Carrie is the protagonist of her friend group, and her problems and relationships come first as her friends support her, grinning and bearing it on the sidelines. While main character syndrome isn't an actual mental health diagnosis, it is generally defined as someone who is self-centered, believes that people around them live to support them, and views himself as the main character. Cynthia Catchings, a therapist for Talkspace, told Insider a person with main character syndrome often thinks or sees himself as someone they imagine or want to be like, or is pretending to be the lead of their own story or self-centered tale. That main character mentality can come with a sense of entitlement that leaves little room for them to provide emotional support to the people in their lives. People with main character syndrome can often present a false image online to sell the plot of their fictional movie, Catching said, presenting their life through rose-coloured lenses. So the reason I bring that all up is because obviously it's an average person believing themselves to be in a TV show. But what happens when you take people who actually act for a living and are the centre of attentions in their own TV shows and movies, when they get into situations where they feel like they need to do something? Essentially, they need to act in a role on the global stage. And I believe this is like a good link to explaining why people like Gal Gadot and others do ridiculous stuff like this. I think it is largely driven by narcissism and obviously massive naiveness on a lot of these people's part in thinking doing something so performative can actually help in any way. So just going to go back over the Imagine stuff, and also we're going to have fun in this video, so I'm going to make you watch all of these things just to remind you how bad they are. I'll play it for you in a sec, but Gal Gadot's star-studded Imagine cover called Cringey and Out of Touch, Why Don't You Just Donate Money? A star-studded cover of John Lennon's Imagine, designed to boost morale during the pandemic, has been labelled cringe and out of touch. Wonder Woman star Gal Gadot assembled the Hollywood figures who participated, including Natalie Portman, Will Ferrell and Amy Adams, all of whom sung lines on the track for a video that has since gone viral. So here is the video for you.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try.
No hell below us.
Above us only sky. Imagine all the people
Living for today. Yeah.
Imagine there is no countries, yeah. It isn't hard to do.
Nothing to kill or die for.
And no religion too.
Imagine all the people living for today.
You may say that I'm a dreamer,
But I'm not the only one.
I hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one.
Imagine no possessions.
I wonder if you can. No need for greed and hunger. Brotherhood of man.
sharing all the world. You, they may say that I'm a dreamer,
But I'm not the only one.
I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one.
Before we go any further, can I just say that is like still one of the worst things I've ever seen. It's really awkward because it's clear some people aren't trying and just like are happy enough to be involved. And then some people are really trying hard and they don't sound that good, so it makes it even worse. So of course, you guys remember there was a massive backlash at the time. Like, what does this even mean in the context of what was happening 2 years ago? Some have praised the video for helping others for a difficult time. Other fans have accused it of being cringeworthy. Many have suggested that the stars involved could have helped the crisis in other ways through donating money. Just saw the Gal Gadot Imagine video and I think it maybe ruined music for me, wrote a member of the psychedelic rock band Unknown Mortal Orchestra. It's been a pretty solid run, but I think it's time for all music to end permanently. Unless they're going to open their wallets, we don't care. What would I do about celebrities posting videos on social media telling us little people it's going to be okay? Imagine being Gal Gadot's personal assistant trying to survive while your idiot boss tells you to cut together a video of random celebrities singing so she can uplift the masses. So nearly 2 years later, Gal Gadot did reflect on this. I don't think it really downplays how stupid it was. Imagine video at the start of the pandemic was in poor taste. So speaking to InStyle magazine, she said the timing of the video was a central problem. The pandemic was in Europe and Israel before it came into the US. I was seeing where everything was headed, but the video was premature, it wasn't the right timing, and it wasn't the right thing, it was in poor taste. All pure intentions, but sometimes you don't hit the bullseye. Speaking to Vanity Fair last year, Gadot was unapologetic about the video, calling it just not the right good deed. I had nothing but good intentions and it came from the best place and I just wanted to send light and love to the world. I can only say that I meant to do something good and pure and it didn't transcend. So it doesn't really seem she realizes why people hated it so much. Like, yes, it's like very, very cringy, but singing Imagine, which I don't know how it really relates to something like a pandemic, and then saying it's like because it wasn't as bad in the US yet, I don't think really matters because loads of people in Europe really hated it as well. But then, like I'm saying, it's like main character syndrome. We have something that affects all parts of the world, came from China originally, swept across like that part of the world first before making its way to like Europe and Asia. It involves so many people. Of course, like so many people have now died, but somehow in the midst of this like global crisis, which is like unprecedented in the lifetimes of pretty much everyone who lived through it and is living through it right now, you decide to make something all about you. And there's like 2 points to it I want to make is like I said before, narcissism is a big one, feeling like you want the attention all to be on you. But if we're going to say like maybe it wasn't narcissistic and it was genuine, then that's even worse in some ways because it's like they feel like they have to do something performative. They have to be the main character. They have to act like the main character syndrome. The whole world actually revolves around them and we're all waiting to see what this person has to say about what's going on and waiting for her to lead us through these troubling times by making a ridiculous performative music video, which she somehow thinks would bring everyone together because her and her rich friends who won't be affected by this pretty much in terms of their own personal health and finances, because most of these people are young and wealthy. She's really the last person we want to hear from. But anyway, this one was just like the most infamous and it was ridiculous. And it's like this bubble these celebrities live in. And it's so weird to me because you'd think like the celebrities who'd been in the worst bubble and the celebrities who would get on board with this and come up with stuff like this would be celebrities who are all in like the biggest and most sheltered bubble. Like for example, like Ryan Gosling was a famous child actor who only became more and more famous. Same with like Leonardo DiCaprio. But people like Leonardo DiCaprio, they use their platforms for like actually good causes. And he seems like fairly level-headed and you don't think he'd ever be doing stuff like this. But with a lot of these celebrities I've just seen, while there's some like notable exceptions, most of the people involved in this video don't really promote many good causes, are not really willing to be controversial because they're afraid of risking their careers. That's another big part for it. People often talk about like the liberal Hollywood hive mind, thinking that also includes leftists. Well, look how Susan Sarandon is treated by Hollywood for being one of the few who doesn't like the Democrats and didn't like Hillary Clinton and stuff like that and voted for Jill Stein. Now they blame her for everything. I think the liberal Hollywood hive mind tolerates conservatives way more than it tolerates left-wing people. And that's why you get so few left-wing people in Hollywood itself. All these people are essentially liberals. Now, in a cringy sequel to this, it seems, not learning the lesson from the Imagine video, there was another one that came out with Aaron Paul's other people, and Insider reporting at the time, people are calling out celebrities for appearing in insincere PSA vowing to take responsibility amid the BLM movement. So celebrities are facing backlash after appearing insincere in a PSA about vowing to take responsibility for their actions and end systemic racism in the US. On Wednesday, Confluential Films released a star-studded video that was made at least in support of the company's partnership with the NAACP for a new campaign titled I Take Responsibility. This video came amid nationwide protests, Black Lives Matter protests, you guys remember. In the black and white video, stars like Sarah Paulson, Aaron Paul, Kesha, Kristen Bell, Justin Theroux, Bryce Dallas Howard, and Julianne Moore called out the times they had contributed to systemic racism through overt and covert actions. For example, Bell pledged to take responsibility for every time it was easier to ignore than to call out what it was. And so let's watch this before talking about it a bit more.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility.
I take responsibility for every unchecked moment.
For every time it was easier to ignore than to call it out for what it was.
Every not so funny joke. Every unfair stereotype.
Every blatant injustice, no matter how big or small.
Every time I remained silent.
I take responsibility. We are no longer bystanders. We will not be idle. Enough is enough.
I will no longer allow an unchecked moment.
I will not turn a blind eye.
We can turn the tide. It is time to take responsibility. Call out hate, step up, and take action.
So I have a bit more sympathy for that one, even though it is still really cringeworthy. Like, what is Aaron Paul doing in that video? It seems really insincere because, again, it seems like a performance. Now, let's get into the backlash because people also noticed a lot of these people didn't even memorize what they were going to say. They were clearly just reading off something. So many people said the video was counterproductive to the tangible efforts made by other stars who have marched in protest, donated money, or shared helpful resources with fans, even if the participants had good intentions. They also viewed it as performative since some of the participants held their hands to their chest as they said, I take responsibility, or put emphasis on phrases and pause between words, seemingly for dramatic effect. Many also criticised Deborah Messing, Stanley Tucci, and Justin Theroux for appearing to read their short lines off a prompt rather than memorising them. These people are all actors. It's unclear how many lines each star was given or how many were selected to be part of the final cut. It's possible that the actors read their sentences in order to uphold appropriate and accurate language while discussing racism. Messing's eyes appeared to scan across the words as she said every blatant injustice, no matter how big or small. And Tucci did the same. I Take Responsibility was created to stand up for black friends and a family. In America, a statement on the site read, our goal was to rally the white community to provide education and encourage action. Our mission is to ensure this takes place. We cannot sit idle while these issues continue throughout our country. So like I said, a lot of these actors in this video come from like more humble beginnings. Some of them don't, like Bryce Dallas Howard, of course, is the daughter of Ron Howard. But you think like someone would watch this and tell them like, yeah, like, I understand your intent, I understand why you want to do this, but maybe don't do this. I feel like every celebrity needs a terminally online left-wing person to watch stuff like this and tell them why people are going to roast them on Twitter about it. It feels like left-wing people are the only good judge of the cringiness in like a good faith way. Of course, the right-wing were making fun of this loads because they believe it's like, oh, liberal Hollywood lecturing us, but left-wing people are like, well, I appreciate you trying to do something. This is just the totally wrong way to go about it. And it's also just like, you feel like we should be amplifying black voices for Black Lives Matter, not getting a bunch of performative white actors to talk about how they will minimize their like microaggressions. Like, you know, I appreciate that to some extent, but it wasn't the time. This was like at the height of the protest. We do not want to hear white privileged celebrities talking about this stuff when you should amplify the voices of celebrities who are actually doing good activism and proper work, mostly like black celebrities, and listen to them. It's like a really broad main character syndrome where it's like all these white people feel like they have to do something and this is the best they can come up with. While the probably correct course of action should be like, don't do this performative stuff, boost resources, boost voices who can actually help change, not do something that makes you feel better. And for a lot of these people who are suffering from main character syndrome, draw the attention to yourself because you feel like you're in your own movie and the world are waiting, like Gal Gadot, the world are waiting for what you have to say on this issue, and we really, really care what you have to say. So yes, celebrities, if any other celebrity asks you to be in some stupid performative video about any issue, however serious, just don't do it. And ask yourself, how can you actually use your platform for good things? And most of these celebrities never use their platforms for good things. They don't actually really care about this stuff. And this becomes really evident whenever something with like Israel comes out, when there's like a couple celebrities who will talk about it, Susan Sarandon, Mark Ruffalo, even though he did chicken out with what he said, while the rest of them are comfortable only talking about politics when the whole of like liberal society is talking about it, and the whole of like corporate society, like how many corporations put out statements, that is where these people feel comfortable actually trying to stand up for something, where most celebrities will never do anything on any other issue. So like Chris Evans hates Donald Trump, always tweeted Donald Trump, talked a lot about Black Lives Matter. When the Israel stuff happened, never said anything. In fact, he actually starred in like this Israeli propaganda film about the Ethiopian airlift, which of course is like quite ironic if we're talking about Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter actually do talk about how Ethiopian Jewish people are treated in Israel. So we've covered the cringe and the stuff that doesn't work. Now let's just go on to the complete like batshit insanity. And I made you guys watch this video last time. It's AnnaLyne McCord, who made a poem about Putin because of what's happening in Ukraine right now and all the awful things Russia are doing. And again, this is probably the worst example of celebrity main character syndrome, because this is just so bizarre. And you've got to ask yourself, who in their right mind sees what's happening there and centers it on themselves, centers it on Putin's upbringing, and writes this absolutely bizarre poem? Not only like writes a poem, she didn't just like publish the poem, gives some really, really strange performance, and obviously trying very, very hard in this performance. So here it is for you guys who may not have seen it. If you have seen it, I just would say watch it again to remind yourself how bad it is.
Dear President Vladimir Putin, I'm so sorry that I was not your mother. If I was your mother, you would have been so loved, held in the arms of joyous light. Never would the stories plight the world unfurled before our eyes, a pure demise of nations sitting peaceful under a night sky. If I was your mother, the world would have been warm. So much laughter and joy, and nothing would harm. I can't imagine the stain, the soul-stealing pain that the little boy you must have seen and believed, and the formulation of thought quickly taught that you lived in a cruel, unjust world. Is this why you now decide no one will get the best of you? Is this why you do not hide nor away shy from taking back the world? Was it because so early in life, all that strife racked your little body with fear? If I was your mother, if the world was cold, I'd have died to make you warm. I'd have died to protect you from the unjust, the violence, the terror, the uncertainty. I would have died to give you life. Oh, dear Mr. President Putin, if only I'd been your mother. Perhaps the torture of unwrit youth would not within your heart imbue ascription to such fealty against that world that you thought was so cruel. Perhaps you would hold dear human life, and on this night, instead of Mother Russia, you would call me, and I would set your mind quite free with the love that only a mother can give, and only a mother can take away. When holds she doesn't the harm at bay and leaves her boy for the promise of a man. Whatever your story, Mr. President Putin, I can't imagine how it feels in your heart, but I know if I was your mother, that would be a start towards the awareness of what a powerful being of light you could be if your mind was only free from the violence you've seen when you were just 2 or 3. I cannot believe I was born too late, in a different place, when I would have loved you so.
So does main character syndrome get worse than this? Not only, like I said before, has she thought of this whole concept up, she is also thinking she could have single-handedly stopped this conflict if she had been Putin's mother. Ignoring like the really complex like geopolitical elements of this conflict, centering it on obviously like one guy who's very important in this, and then acting like, well, if someone like you, or maybe just you, was this guy's mother, then none of this would ever happen. Like, talk about like the worst version of main character syndrome. I don't even know who this person is. I just know she's an American actress. Like, who wants to hear from this person on this specific event? Like many people have said on other causes, with this sort of thing, it's just better to boost charities who are doing good aid work, or, you know, good causes for refugees. Use your platform for that, not this absolutely narcissistic performative nonsense. Like, who is this for? I don't understand who she thought would like this. Like, with the Imagine stuff, as naive as it was, I can understand why she wanted to do that. And even with like the take responsibility thing, working with the NAACP, like I understand why they thought that might be a good idea. I do not even understand what's going through AnnaLyne McCord's head, and she's actually explained why she did this as well. So in an interview with BuzzFeed, AnnaLyne McCord, actor and novice Twitter poet, is defending her viral Putin poem. "I know how I could easily have moved in the direction of becoming a dictator myself," McCord told BuzzFeed when asked about her reasons for writing the poem. "If certain circumstances of my life were different, were I a little less bent towards healing and more towards vindication, I could have been a darkly powerful person." McCord told BuzzFeed News that she was moved to share the poem after waking up in anguish over the children of war, presumably the young Ukrainians. She said she feels for the children who grow into adults and become people who do historically horrifying things because she personally understands early life trauma, which she based on her own experience. Though the poem is directed towards Putin himself, she said her mission is to raise awareness about the changes needed within education systems to protect children and stop creating dictators, abusers, and bullies. So lots of left-wing people talk about like how systems create individuals. There's someone myself who just believes everyone is a product of their environment. Basically, no one has free will. You're essentially just like a robot. And everything that affects the person you are is created by outside influences. You know, it could be as immediate as your parents, which is the big one for most people, teachers, siblings, and then of course like where you grow up, what religion you're in, what part of the country you live in, and then that shapes you into the person you will be. And of course, to try and make people into like better people, more empathetic people, you do have to intervene, especially with people who come from like troubled backgrounds and stuff, make sure they can become at least like functioning adults who don't have to carry loads and loads of trauma, or even if they do, they can be helped to work through it, make them, I guess, like just better people in general. So I completely understand that logic, especially like she said, she came from a hard background as well. But then I really don't think you can simplify that for what's going on in the world right now. And it feels very bizarre for this moment in history for you to be making this point. Like I would say, if you're going to talk about these sort of like systems creating these like horrible individuals, wouldn't like the police and Black Lives Matter thing be like a way better example? Because we're talking about like how to change this systemic issue rather than talking about like this massive geopolitical issue and one man, and you could have personally changed his mind about going through this course of action. But again, I think this is like the apex of celebrity main character syndrome, because this is just like an individual doing this. It's not like the others where there's a group of people, or like Gal Gadot leading a group of cringeworthy celebrities in making this point. So it's one person who just feels like the whole world needs to hear their message and is waiting for their message or their insight about this issue. Again, very silly, but this is like very common for celebrities, and these are like three of like the more bizarre or like worse recent examples. But this has been going on for years, because for every celebrity who uses their platform to make a good point, like Marlon Brando not accepting his Oscar for The Godfather seems like a good example of where he like took himself out of the whole equation by not even showing up to the Oscars and having Sachin Littlefeather read out his letter to the Academy Awards. Again, like, of course, it's involving him, but he's getting someone to read it who is making the point about Native Americans, someone who is Native American. And I think that's like a good example for people where you just use your platform to raise the voice of others and actually have their voice on your own platform. Like, does it get bigger than one of the most famous actors of all time winning an Oscar for his most famous role of all time, literally one of the most famous acting roles ever created, and he uses it for good political purposes? Obviously others like Paul Newman, and more lately like Susan Sarandon, Mark Ruffalo, and to I think like a lesser extent Leonardo DiCaprio, but he does do good work. There are celebrities who do that. But then there's LiveAid, BandAid, LiveAid. There's all this performative nonsense that is often steeped in main character syndrome, but also a lot of white savior stuff. So I want to do BandAid and LiveAid just to show how this isn't like relatively new because of social media. So I want to read some lyrics from the song Do They Know It's Christmas? Now, everyone watching this would have heard this song if you're from a country that celebrates Christmas. I'd wager even a lot of you who are from countries that don't celebrate Christmas will have heard this song, because it has literally like every famous artist from the 1980s singing on it, and it was in response to the Ethiopian famine in 1984. But of course this is all organised by Bob Geldof, so just getting into the lyrics first. And in our world of plenty we can spread a smile of joy, throw your arms around the world at Christmas time, But say a prayer for the other ones. At Christmas time it's hard, but when you're having fun, there's a world outside your window, and it's a world of dread and fear, where the only water flowing is the bitter sting of tears, and the Christmas bells that ring, there are the clanging chimes of doom. Well, tonight, thank God it's them instead of you. And there won't be snow in Africa this Christmas time. The greatest gift they'll get this year is life, where nothing ever grows, no rain nor rivers flow. Do they know it's Christmas time at all? Bear a thought this Yuletide for the deprived. If the table was turned, would you survive? Here's to them underneath that burning sun. You ain't gotta feel guilt, just selfless. Give a little help to the helpless. Do they know it's Christmas time at all? So some of you guys might not have even thought about the lyrics, but it's talking about the Ethiopian famine. So why is it making like absolutely massive sweeping generalizations about Africa? So according to this song, there's no water in Africa. It's all a big desert. No one celebrates Christmas. There is no snow in Africa. Africa is essentially just one big wasteland of nothingness where everyone is really poor, suffering from famine, and is brutalized. Like, the colonialism just seeps through these lyrics so badly. And of course, like, there were people who brought this up at the time, but it wasn't like the social media days. You couldn't get a lot of voices and marginalized groups speaking up about like how they feel this is really bad. In fact, a lot of people at the time who wrote articles condemning this were actually like just drowned out by the mainstream media and were seen as people trying to undermine like legitimately good charity work. And of course, like a lot of people involved, including Bono and Phil Collins, like really regret being involved in this, and they feel like super embarrassed they were even a part of this. Well, Bob Geldof has doubled down like numerous times, saying it's like the greatest thing ever, although even though a lot of the money raised went into the hands of the Ethiopian dictator who was causing a lot of the famine. But they actually did like a 30th anniversary song, leading to a lot of people to just think about the lyrics and what happened back in the 80s. So another article at the same time as this re-release, They Know It's Christmas. They know it's Christmas. People in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone definitely know it's Christmas because many of them are Christian. In a weighted sample of respondents in Liberia, 87% identify as Christian, 46% in Sierra Leone, while 54% identify as Muslims. In Guinea, 9% of the population identify as Christian. Do they know it's Christmas is othering. It treats Africans as a homogenous whole of diseased people who are suffering without help from outsiders. As we have previously discussed, spreading such inaccurate and misleading information can lead to dangerous prejudices and discrimination against people of African descent. I feel like there's a whole video to be made about like BandAid and LiveAid. If you actually look into what happened to all that money, it is so fascinating and also like depressing as hell, and pretty much just sums up the point of performative celebrity activism, in that the way this operation was run really didn't help things, gave a lot of money to the dictator, but ultimately what it served as is for the celebrities involved and the people who gave the money is just a way to feel good. Like, if you make Africa this giant diverse continent and you boil it down to desert, jungle, tribal people, famine, no snow, barely any water and rivers, it creates a convenient picture in Westerners' head that, well, you have to help them. Like, these people can't help themselves because of the conditions of Africa itself. It's not anything to do with like Western interference and how the West has historically brutalized Africa or how they continue to do it. Like the IMF and World Bank, who back all the worst dictators, all the socialist revolutionary Africans who were overthrown in places like the Congo, and then a Western-backed dictator was put in to brutally put down all these movements, serving the interests of capital. Those are the real problems. And even things like the Arab Spring, which is like a popular anti-capitalist uprising against these IMF policies and these Western-backed dictators, got boiled down to, well, the Africans and Arabs are actually finally sick of dictators. They used to love dictators. Remember like Nasser and Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi? Well, they hate them now because they're finally becoming civilized. Not that these people were actually rising up because of Western economic policies. So the framing just helps people see a complex issue and makes it simple, and also erases the West's historic role and current role in keeping this region historically poor, while the West exploit all the rich minerals which could make these countries rich if they nationalized them, which loads of people tried to do, and guess what? They all ended up dead at the hands of Belgium, the US, France, and the UK. The LiveAid's like a more interesting case study, but obviously like has all these elements combined. You have Bob Geldof, you have all the celebrities, you have obviously like Queen, you have George Michael, you have Bono and U2, you have all these people who probably thought they were doing something very important. They were doing something amazing. And of course, some of those performances are like absolutely iconic. Is it the Queen one, which was in the Bohemian Rhapsody film? And that is obviously like such an amazing performance by Queen. But at the end of the day, it like masks the real problems of this stuff. It's just, again, performative activism. So anyway, that is it for Celebrity Main Character Syndrome. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you want to follow me on social media, at the Kavernacle on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to join my community, check out the subreddit. And if you want to support my work, check out my Patreon. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching.